Alright, so game number one. Gonna be myself against Ice Power, getting in some practice, and trying to figure out a nice build that works against greenskins. I've overtuned the build a tiny bit to deal with skirmishers and goblins, one of the main problems I faced up in the last tournament. Which means that more conventional full archer builds for the greenskins would be a bit of a problem. But it's better to figure out a hard counter first and then dial it back a tiny bit, since I don't even know if this counter will work. Now for the formation, it's mostly just a defense on Noctilus. These zombies are basically here to hold the line for the actual damage dealers to throw their bombs. With the more maneuverability of the greenskins too. If I go too wide and spread my zombies out like this, as we saw in the tournament games, the greenskins can pull either to the left or to the right to get my troops out of position, sort of muck up my engagement. So going for a bit of a tighter build feels about right. As soon as Alfredino is ready, we'll be able to jump on into the game. For Grom and other single entities, double gunnery white should be able to do very good there, and spirit leeches too are mostly negated by the invocation of Nahak. The only question is whether or not I have enough firepower to win this fight. I'll have to see in just a second. I think, as Mulder says, I think the post-game analysis is harder to learn, but equally important part of getting better. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Here we go. The match has begun, and we're gonna see if the Necrofex has what it takes to kill off all these skirmishers. Volley number one gets a few models right off the bat. That's very good, and the gunnery whites too will be poking away at any skirmishers. So already a pretty nice advantage. I want to be hitting up these squig hoppers though, as they are pretty high DPS and very important to take out. One volley from the Necrofex already takes out a ton of them. Very good for me. And then, yeah, I'll just continue picking away at them. The Sirens are extremely tanky. They basically won't be dying. And there's a little bit of an opportunity here for my Bomber Bats to overload the flank. Looks like the Spider Riders are responding in kind, so that they don't... so that the goblins don't get completely demolished here. I will be eating a bit of archer fire, but that's not too worrisome when it comes to my bats. They're actually pretty maneuverable and can dodge shots quite well. As for the double gunnery white, let's go ahead and just melt this front line of goblins real fast. That looks like it works out pretty well. 2 goblin units are gone, but the fanatics still live. That's going to be a tiny bit threatening. But now what I can do, now that the skirmishers are over here, I can actually move all of my bomber bats to a single flank. Start melting down these archer boys. Same with these goblin, let's see, archers over here. And I can even start pushing them with my forces. The scurvy dog specifically should be able to do pretty well. And I'd say things are going quite good for me so far. We routed off the front line. The Irines are still doing good, although I do need to begin healing them up. And as for the River Troll Hag, she'll be dying to the 2 gunnery whites, I think. As for any greenskins that do manage to push through, they're not particularly scary, as I do have more Scab's Grasp at the ready. And some pistol summons too should be able to punish these savage orc big guns fairly well. Dogs are looking good, and so far this looks like it's going very well in my favor. Easily chase off the River Troll Hag now, and these flying bomber bats are really just amazing. They will sometimes do a lot better than your standard bombers, especially against a lot of players who know how to dodge. And we're seeing here one of the banes of the greenskins. These flyers are extremely hard to pick off because they are very spread out, and as long as I keep them maneuverable, they do pretty good. I've also set up the game where I'm in a position of a fairly easy counterplay. these skirmishers that decide to dive in onto my backline will get pretty messed up by a charge from my scurvy dogs. Of course, the scurvy dogs can't push out towards the skirmishers, but if they are able to countercharge, it generally works out pretty well. I'm also trying out ignoring Grom to see how that goes, as he's not really a high priority target right now. I more so want to be killing off the river troll hags, as yeah, the river troll hags, they are much easier to kill off than Grom himself. And just a few volleys from Noctilus. She should be going down in just a second. Ammunition too, very important. And here we go. I'm gonna charge in with these dogs and give them a good old heal. Now, as soon as the River Troll Hag routes off, it's basically just gonna be Grom. Against the world, really. Although he is pretty scary against the two gunnery wights. He can chase off my dogs too. And there's a bit of an archer problem in this game. Actually, quite a few archers here that I need to be a bit wary of. But I do still have my bomber bats, so I don't think hope is lost. In fact, they'll be able to push them off, and I think just having that this anti-infantry option is going to be saving me here. As for the scurvy dogs, they are too beat up to really engage, but they do run really good distractions for the rest of the greenskin army. Essentially, I'll just be dancing around with them as much as I can, and the greenskins won't really be able to do a whole ton to actually catch them. They're very mobile, and as long as I'm trying to not get my dogs caught, they'll be able to run pretty freely. There we go. Dogs are still doing okay, and I think right now my priorities is gonna be keeping my... It's gonna be keeping the dogs alive, or maybe the sirens. The sirens are healthy enough though, so I'm not sure. Maybe I'll try to stay efficient with my winds of magic and attempt to group them up for a heal. That actually feels much better. As for my bomber bats, another resupply of ammunition will keep them nice and healthy for the battle to come. And here we go. The winds of magic is nearly there, so it's time I group up my sirens for that sweet, sweet overcast Nahek. For the double gunnery white, you can see they are extremely deadly versus Grom. They basically don't take much damage at all because of their high armor, and with their high armor piercing DPS, not too much Grom can really do in that situation. The bomber bats are doing cleanup, which is perfect because usually I'd be running dogs to clean things up here, but in this case, clean up with the flyers is much more efficient when the greenskin archer count is extremely low. In this case, it is a Wraith Storm on top of Grom, and that's gonna be it. Not bad, not bad. That worked out quite well. So I like the build as a counter to what I played against the other day, but I don't think it's a it's a build that that will always work. It's not a fully safe build, and like I said, I think a committed rush would probably be a bit scary, but can't really argue that the bombers aren't good. They did extremely well. And I really do like the sirens here. Despite the magic damage, they actually survived a really long time. And I'll probably be running 2 of them in most builds against greenskin. So I'll call that a success. But now it's time to see if this build works in other cases. Now for this build, it's a Skaven build, a rush, as today is going to be primarily focused on rushing. And the Skaven, myself, I brought a build with Death Runners and Doom Flayers as my main DPS. But one of the problems that I have right now is that I'm a tiny bit exposed to gyrocopters. Usually want Rattling Guns or a unit of Jezzails to defend against them. I think that's going to be the misplay that screws me over here. But if I can get the rush going fast enough, I'll be good. Now, Alfredino's army is quite small. I'm expecting there likely will be gyrocopters. Usually, dwarves don't go super elite in this build because of the poison wind effects. So, it's going to be a lot of damage mitigation for sure. Just whether or not I can prevent the damage that comes in on Queek and the Engineer. And I'll be using my Skaven Slave Slingers to accomplish most of that. Not exactly the best choice against gyros, but if I actually have Queek sort of running circles, it will take a while before they actually die. If he has gyros, we can blame him on stream sniping. Alright, I think Escarian has it figured out, and here we go. We're seeing 3 gyrocopters, a brimstone gun, a brimstone gun, brimstone gun. Immediately, he's on the search for these death runners, but I don't really like vanguarding with my death runners. I actually leave them pretty close to home, and makes it a little bit harder for Alfredino to spot them. But immediately, the brimstone guns, they are moving towards my doom wheels. They may even spot one of the death runners. It's gonna be close, but it looks like they just barely do. Oh, would you look at that? However, there are no steam gyros, so the death runners should be pretty free to get their damage in. Now, for these miners with blasting charges, they're a little bit of a worry. You have to play pretty carefully to avoid getting hit by a huge blasting charge volley. But as long as you maneuver your infantry correctly, you can avoid most heavy volleys from them. And as they pull away and attempt to retreat, I'll be diving right on in, trying to get these death runners into some proper engagement. They'll be diving in right into the backs of the dwarves. I do lose one of my doom flayers. That was nearly inevitable, given the amount of gyrocopters here. But now we'll see if I'm able to overrun with this death runner squad. Slayers are pretty scary versus them, and miners with blasting charges can do really well too. So it's definitely something to avoid. And let's see, yeah, I'm moving on into the Slayers now. They're going to be pulling away, actually, which lets the Death Runners get quite a bit of damage. And given that there's so much artillery here, I'm not too worried about the Dwarf ground force. I should be able to pull through pretty efficiently. As for my my Lord and my heroes, I want to throw down a Crack's Call somewhere eventually, but I'm not sure exactly where yet. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. As for Grom Brindle, it looks like he wants to have a head-on fight with Queek Headtaker himself. I think that engagement goes well for me. And really the focus is just diving in onto this artillery now. The Death Runners too can support Queek in his endeavors, and we'll even give him a Death Frenzy to really make sure that that fight goes my way. The Slayers too, I do have a really nice counter to them in the Wolf Rats, as long as they are actually charging them. Wolf Rats are amazing versus Slayers. They just do so much damage, but the Slayers can't really hit back before getting shut down. With Grom Brindle nearly down, thinking should be in a pretty nice position. The Dwarf forces have been overrun, and just the aggressive rush is paying off really well. Grom Brindle is now dead, and even if we do lose Queek, he's essentially served his purpose, as there are no more, there aren't really any more Dwarf forces to, or Dwarf single entities to kill off. Queek's main priority is to kill off heroes, and yeah, essentially there aren't any left. Let's go ahead and throw down a Flinching Ruin maybe, or perhaps a Crack's Call right over here, just to see how much damage it does to the Dwarf warriors. Looks like, come on. Wow, pretty good damage. Would you look at that? Sort of like a delayed Penumbral Pendulum, actually. Definitely not too bad. A spell that I might want to use more in the future. And even the overcast Death Frenzies are fairly cheap. They do help a tiny bit. I'm not sure how impactful they really were in this game. More so, it really just was the Death Runners and the very aggressive rush. Yep, another head for Queek, but he's about to get shot up by gyrocopters like no one's business. The revenge volleys are gonna be putting him out of commission very quickly. And in this case, I feel like the threat overload might have been a bit too much for the gyrocopters. They needed to throw bombs onto the Death Runners and kill off the heroes and kill off the Doomflayers. So even with a heavy gyrocopter force, he just really didn't have enough infantry to buy time to do all of those things, and that really didn't work out for Alfredino. Death Frenzy is fairly good. Yeah, let's see. Plus 24 melee attack, plus 30% weapon damage. Like, it'll turn Death Runners into meat grinders. They'll have like 80 melee attack versus infantry? Nah, closer to 70, but that's still very crazy. And as for the gyros, we're gonna see one of their main pitfalls now. They basically have no ammunition. They will often run out. And once they actually have to dive into melee combat, they are pretty terrible at that. They are pretty sturdy. It takes a while to actually kill them. But in melee, gyrocopters, they will die to even this Warlock Engineer. And without enough ammunition to pick off the rest of my ground forces, I'm not especially worried. Wait. So there we go. The last of the dwarf infantry is routed off, which means it's just the gyrocopters now. They're doing a decent job routing off a few Skaven slaves, dropping some bombs on my infantry. But now the true threat, my gutter runners, no, not my gutter runners, my death runners are diving in, and they're going to be putting in quite a bit of damage onto these gyrocopters. A bomb volley does drop, but there's a lot more death runner where that came from. So this game, yeah, there's not much that can really be done. If these were steam gyros, they actually would have been able to do okay. But of course, steam gyros would have had a much harder time against the oh man, thinking steam gyros would have had a much worse time against the Doomflayers for sure. There we go. That's 2 gyrocopters routed off. Army losses. That's gonna be game. GG. Pretty rough game for the Dowie. There were a lot of cannons, and this build, it seemed like it was more specialized to kill off the weapon teams. I think had I gone for Giselles and Rattling guns, I actually might have lost it. The dwarves, they usually will go for these types of all-in builds to try and hard counter Skaven styles. So if you go something unexpected, it can actually pay off fairly well. And let's see, yeah. Looks like everything did about fine. Nothing really got their value off, strangely enough. Except for, I guess, the Skaven Slave Slingers, who are still very cost-effective despite the cost increase. Here we go. It's a match between myself and Alfredino again. And guess what? I have a Vanguard build up against your Skirmish build, and this is why this type of build can work out pretty well. As I am immediately chasing him down with my Shadow, with my Deepwood Scouts, and his Shadow Warriors are just taking a lot of damage on the initial charge. Now there are a couple Dragon Princes moving in, actually Silver Helms instead. A big volley could actually do some pretty good damage, and it's just going to be a Russian with this, with the Tree Man really. A few Rangers move in to try to intercept, but they'll actually be going down fairly quickly, and the Dryads, although a tiny bit beat up, are still going to be rather threatening in this game. Deepwood Scouts, they're gonna continue moving forwards, and for all these archers, I have pendulums to punish them quite a bit. And there we go, the Wild Riders are in, and the Tree Man with his terror is gonna be routing off many of these forces. This really is one of the nightmare scenarios for the High Elves. Even an armor buff onto all these Wild Riders mean they basically won't be dying here. And the Deepwood Scouts, their job is to basically advance as much as possible. They need to be constantly pushing the archers and using their very high DPS to just kill off as many archers as they can. The Wild Riders will be going down, unfortunately, but not without tanking a ton of damage thanks to these Zoats and their very high armor now. Actually, they have 100 armor and shield, so they're basically not going to be falling anytime soon. And with the Zoats backing them up, I think this game is basically done. Essentially just a very vicious deployment, and just a hard rush from the Wood Elves. It can really punish some High Elf builds. As the High Elves in general, I would recommend you go for a style or a spawn position that is sort of further away from these types of vanguards, since you don't really need to have a large portion of the map under your control most of the time. Now at this point, it's basically just closing things out. The Deepwood Scouts will be chasing off the archers, and because most of them can't really turn and fire at the same time, it's gonna be they won't really have too much DPS, while my own DPS stays more or less the same for the rest of the fight. 3-man 2, basically indestructible in this situation. He definitely won't be falling anytime soon. As really, you need a lot of archer fire to take him out. So I think even if I had lost the rest of my army, the 3-man would actually be able to carry fairly well here. Especially in combination with Drycha. And soon enough, I think the High Elf forces, they're going to be hitting army losses, but Alfredino taps out instead. And that's gonna be it. The Zoat Wild Riders. That worked out really well. 100 armor with those spells. That was insane. Look at them. Just suiciding in, they still got their value back. At least most of it. And the real heroes, though, the Deepwood Scouts. All of them paid for themselves by the end of the game. And it wasn't even a long battle either. With the Lothern Sea Guard just running most of the game, it's a pretty rough time. Yeah, Shadow Warriors, they need a lot more time to sit and use their ammunition before they pay off, which is why this type of rush can be quite vicious. But for this next match, it is a rush build, quote unquote, against Chaos. Sort of a kite build too. Essentially what I have is a lot of mobility, Sirens and so on, and Noctilus to pick off any Marauder Horsemen. To pick off any Marauder Horsemen, so that in the late game, my deck droppers can really just hard carry. Now, as per usual, we are seeing a Chaos Sorcerer of Fire, and what he's gonna do, he's gonna be a little bit of a problem up against so many, he's gonna be a tiny bit of a problem, as Chaos Sorcerers, the fire damage will really melt down my Sirens. But the main advantage here I have, of course, is speed. Now, Forsaken, I think the Sirens trade fairly well into them. Noctilus will continue punishing the Marauder Horsemen quite well. They really can't dodge his shots, as they're basically cannon shots. They move in very quickly. And yeah, I'm just going to be slowly pulling away with my zombies. There's no real reason to engage in this situation. And I can just be using most of my APM. Well, yeah, I can mostly just kiting away, really. Let's go ahead and summon some zombies, too. Just so that I have a little bit of an easier escape angle here. And then begin pulling away. Now, Noctilus isn't amazing at disengaging. And interestingly enough, the Forsaken have actually are proving to be a little bit of a problem, too, versus many of my forces. I'm seeing that my Sirens are actually taking quite a bit of damage. I also accidentally took Pit of Shades on Noctilus. That's a little bit awkward, but I'll make do. And yeah, we'll see how all these Sirens do. The Forsaken, they do really well versus low armored forces. Sirens, you know, they don't have a lot of armor. So that's actually going to be a tiny bit scary. But what I will get is a pretty nasty pit of shades on all the mirror guard. I guess, well, you know, usually people don't expect it. And there we go, it drops right down on top of them. I should be killing off quite a few Chaos Warriors. And the kiting will continue. The gun bats will be very nice up against these Chaos Warriors. And with the gunnery wights constantly supplying them with ammunition, they basically won't be running out. Noctilus too, just sort of running away, and I'll be pulling in the Sirens for any engagements I feel like are advantageous for me. But the Forsaken looks like they're doing okay versus Sirens. It's sort of a mixed fight. It can sort of go either way by the looks of it. So we'll see how that plays out later on into the game. As for my gun bats, I'm gonna need to heal them up. Perfect timing. My Sirens just get annihilated by a burning head. So a good enough time as any to pull away into a heal that will keep them fighting for a good amount longer. Now for these Marauder Horsemen, how will I be dealing with them? Of course, Noctilus with his terror can just rush directly towards him and do fairly well. Let's see here, but I'm not sure. He's actually taking quite a bit of damage from these Chaos Warriors with halberds. For my gunnery wight, Sigvald is on the job and chasing them down as quickly as he can. And a lot of my Sirens have started to die. So there's a lot to worry about here. But as the Marauder Horsemen slowly go down, my deck gunners will only get more and more ahead in the game. Noctilus, he'll be able to finish off the Marauder Horsemen soon enough. And as for the Sirens, I still have 3 of them out of 4, so that's not too terrible. Noctilus too, he can group up for a pretty nice heal also. And that'll be able to pick him up. And then stop him from dying horribly, as we definitely don't want him to die here. His life is imperative in this situation, as I really need him as my lord to provide leadership for my Sirens, and also just as a means to keep picking off these Marauder Horsemen, who have proven quite sticky. They've lasted on the battlefield for quite some time. But now that they're routing off for another time, it should be most of them off the battlefield. There's only 2 of them left. As long as Noctilus lives, the kiting should be able to begin pretty soon. The more ammunition onto the gun bats will keep them alive for much longer. We're almost in that situation where the kiting can commence. I have my 2 gunnery wights. I got Noctilus. Gun bats are firing away quite some time. Noctilus has taken a lot of damage, but not an insane amount. He will be able to continue surviving, although I think a heal on himself is probably necessary here. And we'll see if this last unit of Marauder Horsemen can get taken out. For the Sirens, they'll be running interference against these Chaos Warriors. They can sort of just push them back by cycle charging, and that should be enough to really stop any major issues on that front. A little bit of a problem though. Sigvald coming in for that booty, charging my crabs, and he actually does manage to catch one of them. So unless I can get my handgunners to start shooting into him, it's not going to be a great situation. Fireball comes in on Noctilus too, and he's going to be very low. Let's see here. Will he die though? His leadership is still high, so I think he should be okay, but it's going to be a bit of a close one. And he might have to pull into some Sirens to actually save him. I do rout off the Marauder Horsemen though, so that is very good. And perhaps a gooning attempt on Sigvald will now be possible. As for heals on Noctilus, if he does get into melee combat, he will begin healing up. And for Sigvald, he is mostly alone at this point. So I think as long as Noctilus doesn't doesn't lose leadership here. No! Oh, the heal. It's 1 second too short, and Noctilus actually just straight up dies. That is very unfortunate. Just the constant spirit leeches really punishing him there. And that's going to be really rough. The loss of leadership, definitely not good. So I'm going to try to return the favor here to Chaos and actually begin shooting Sigvald to death now. Like I said, the two gunnery wights, they are pretty great at killing off single entities, as long as they're not getting gooned up on by so much infantry. And in this case, there are quite a few halberds here. So I'm going to pull to the safety of my sirens, and then see if these gun bats have what it takes to actually rout off these forces. It looks like maybe not, and that might just end the game right then and there. But Sigvald, although pretty scary, the two gunnery wights, if they can actually land a couple of hits and rout him off, that would be rather huge. I think he's getting hit by the sirens too, so he should actually have his melee defense reduced a tiny bit, but the sirens crumble away due to the loss of Noctilus. And honestly, if Noctilus had lived, I think I would have been good. Just taking too much damage over the course of the game, and this is likely gonna be it. Although I'll still stick around in case the gunnery wights manage to pull off a miracle here. Possibly a huge scab scrath to rout off all of the infantry. Let's even charge in a couple bats to rout off the rest of them. And then just see if he can hit Sigvald. Now, just hitting Sigvald is no easy task. He'll be sticking around. And there we go, that's gonna be it. You well played, Noctilus. Just barely falling in a hugely close game against Chaos. I do really like the build. The mass siren style did pretty good. I'm wondering, possibly I could have cut a siren for more gun bats, because they were actually the main ones doing the damage there. The Necrofex, I think, is a great idea against Marauder Horsemen, which are very common in this matchup. Noctilus was killing them off like no tomorrow. So with a bit of optimization, I think this build has teeth for sure. Yeah, and if it was the gunnery wights against Sigvald alone, they actually almost killed him off. I think they would have won that battle. So very fun game. And I guess we'll be moving on to the next one now. So here we go. Alfredino's going for a blob-ish style. Let's see, double manticore, some skirmishers. Okay. What's his he has a caster of metal, presumably final transmutation. And what's this? Skin wolves, armored. Alright, so that means I can actually emerge with the Green Knight. Pretty easily ward off these skirmishers and just keep my knights safe with the usage of my peasant archers. Now for this build, the Lord is going to be Wolfic on a mammoth, just a couple chariots. And honestly, I think a full surround with my knights actually does pretty well. The biggest threat for me is the double manticore. And I'll have to be very careful that the Fey Enchantress doesn't get gooned out by that. If I can pull that off, I think I'll be just fine. So let's go ahead and pull in with my knights and begin cycle charging all of these Norskin berserkers. And then pull back with my peasant archers just a tiny bit. Never mind, they need to be helping kill off the Marauder Horsemen. And let's see how the cycle charging goes. Some Marauders are a bit exposed, so I'm free to go ahead and charge in. And then it's all about cycle charging, getting a pretty nice surround on these forces. Now I have a ton of knights, but gotta be aware that a final transmutation is possible. And that'll cause a lot of damage if I'm not careful. So I'm actually going to take this caster and hit him up with my knights. I'm going to push him away, and hopefully he doesn't get too scary of an overcast transmutation on me. If I can pull that off, then I think I'll actually be in a pretty decent position. This blob fight even, it's going pretty well in my favor. If I can get a few of the guys to start routing off, that would be absolutely amazing. Go ahead and throw down a chalice of potions too. That'll do really well for routing off most of these forces. And then we'll see how well the knights do as I continue to cycle charge in and out of this situation. Balance of power actually goes out of my favor though. A little bit worrying. But as another knight charge comes on in, we'll buff them up with the Fey Enchantress, her Mortis Engine effect really kicking in. And I think the Green Knight, he might be one of the hard carries here. The double Manticore can't really easily escape either. So they shouldn't actually be able to cycle charge the Fey Enchantress. And she'll have a pretty free reign when it comes to these engagements. Under the huge charge from my knights could do pretty well. Final Transmutation does drop. They'll be taking a good amount of damage. But I've routed off most of the Norskin forces at this point. The Green Knight is still extremely healthy. And I even knock the Chaos Sorcerer out. So he doesn't actually get off that Final Transmutation. Absolutely amazing on my part. Or at least good luck for me. And now Wulfric, surrounded by Grail Knights, the most elite of Bretonnian infantry. He's going to be getting killed by the Green Knight fairly quickly. And the Fey Enchantress, she just really has to make sure that the Manticores don't kill her. So I can quite nicely pull her away. And it looks like she'll be fine. Now another Final Transmutation, I might get thrown down. I'll have to be a little bit careful here that doesn't nuke my entire army. And there are a lot of single entities here. So it's important that my shock cavalry is pulling out. And I'll use my Grail Guardians to hold the line as long as they can. The Enchantress looks like she's continuing to hold pretty well. And another charge on Wulfric should get him pretty low at this point. Go ahead and keep pulling out with the Fey Enchantress though. Doesn't want to stay too long in a pretty dicey engagement like this. And we'll leave Wulfric to the Green Knight. Some Archer Fire into the Blob 2 should go pretty well. And I'll throw down a Chalice of Potions, but actually I don't think I really need to, as the Chalice of Potions, it'll be mostly killing off my own knights, and I definitely don't want that to happen. So here we go, just continuous cycle charging, and that's gonna be it. Just yeah, really using the elite infantry. The knights are extremely hard to kill off, and there we go. The Norskins have routed, and that's gonna be game. I can chase off Wulfric at this point, and yeah, even with the Blob build, I managed to do okay. I did really luck out though, in that the Final Transmutation didn't actually trigger on my forces, but it went out okay. Let's see here. Yeah, Green Knight, he's gonna be killing off Wulfric. He has no healing, so that fight should go quite well in my favor. There are still a couple single entities left, but yeah, it's basically just a Skin Wolf. So the Green Knight should be more than enough in that situation. Alright, and there we go. That guy is gone. A little bit of a Searing Doom drops down on my cavalry. No problem at all. Then a charge to some throwing axes. Yeah, it's basically cleanup at this point. To push towards army losses, the best strategy is to snipe out the rest of the single entities. And then I'll be good. Let's see here. Yeah, just Wulfric really, and the Skin Wolf are probably the biggest threats and the highest contributors to the balance of power. The Green Knight really runs no risk of dying, as he is ethereal and quite tanky. Wulfric charging in a final attempt to kill him off, but he is a anti-infantry specialist, and as the Green Knight finishes him off, that's going to be GG. There we go. Nice and simple. Very good. The real winners here. Well, really, the Green Knight did amazing here. Fey Enchantress in a blob like this is very effective, and I sort of like the build. I think it worked out okay. Searing Doom plus Glittering Robe, you think? Oh, I see. So maybe the spell did go off, but he didn't have a Final Transmutation. That would make sense. The Skin Wolf sort of just got surrounded. They didn't do too well. The Manticores did surprisingly well, though. And single entities are quite strong against cavalry. But with nothing to really counter the Green Knight, I think I was okay. Alright, so on to the next game. All right, for this next build, it's not exactly a rush, but it doesn't have artillery. It's a build that I've bought many times for Beastmen before, and I'm just trying to see if this actually works out as well as I think. There's a Beastcaster, has the let's see, the Amber Spear, which is very scary against builds like this. He will annihilate the Iron Breakers if I'm not careful. So it's super important that I make sure I micro well enough to avoid any Amber Spear shenanigans. Looks like he's getting in position. Perhaps a shot will be dropping in just a second. There we go, right on the Iron Breakers. Oh, I pulled just a little bit too late. Oh my gosh, it hits my Longbeards instead. Absolutely brutal. That's a good amount of damage right off the bat. But not too bad. At least it didn't kill off too many Ironbreaker models. And more or less, I really want to focus on the Bestigor herd with the Ironbreakers. And once those guys are down, I'm not too worried. All right. So what do we got? Got let's see here, some Ungor herd taking a position. It looks like they're gonna be flanking, heading on into the back. Nothing particularly scary. And for my Quarrelers, they can just kill off the Ungor raiders, really. A few Butchers of Kalkengard, not too worrisome, as I do have Slayers. I will be swapping out the Slayers though, so that they can so that I have better Slayers to deal with the Butchers. Also going to keep a close eye on the on the Amber Spears in case more of them drop. This guy charges into my Longbeards too. Actually pretty ineffective trade since my Slayers can dive directly on top of them. Actually takes a few points of damage there off the bat. So I think that works out in my favor. And now the Beastmen have a full surround in on me. Now I simply wait for their push in. Another Amber Spear does drop. It's going to be hitting my Quarrelers. I pull my troops a tiny bit to get them into a safer position. But they're still going to be taking quite a bit of heat anyways. Now, for the Bestigor herd, strategy is to break them down below half HP so that they don't have their frenzy ability left. And doing that as quickly as possible can be done using the Iron Breakers. My Lord procs his buffs to keep the Longbeards alive as long as possible. And once the Bestigors are low on HP, then I think I'll be okay. If I can get them to rout too, that would be even better. It's important that these Iron Breakers stay on guard mode, so that they can actually continue throwing their bombs despite being engaged on. The Quarrelers can maneuver them into better positions to more easily fire their shots. Essentially just pull them away from the Harpies and then use your Slayers to push through. And now we just wait to see how this goes. My Slayers have routed off the caster of the Beastmen, and most of the Harpies are going to be off the battlefield in just a second. And with their Lord in a bit of a precarious situation, if I can actually kill off this Beast Lord, that would be pretty huge. Although he does manage to pull away. Tiny bit unfortunate. But so far, things are going decently. My Iron Breakers, though, they are having a bit of a hard time actually getting their volleys off. A few of the Bestigors do manage to get a bit more damage than I would have hoped. And that might have ended the game right then and there. We'll just have to see. It depends on how well these Iron Breakers hold. One of them actually routing off. It looks like this might actually close out pretty quickly. A little bit of not getting my bombs off enough on the Bestigor. Herds actually loses the frontline fight. And it's just going to come down to whether or not the rest of the army can hold. I do win the right flank. Most of these guys do get routed off. My Lord is stuck in the fight with these Iron Breakers, and they are an amazing unit for clearing out infantry, as they have their blasting charges. And with a few volleys onto these Bestigors, I might actually be able to get quite a few of them to rout off the battlefield. My Lord, too, with his -8 melee attack, will be extremely good at at keeping the Bestigors from actually killing off my Iron Breakers, and with a mass rout on the way, it seems like things might actually be turning into my favor. Really, the biggest threat at this point are the Butchers of Kalkengard, and the few chariots that are still on the battlefield. But the Iron Breakers should be able to survive fairly well. As for the Butchers, we're just gonna have to brace for their charges mostly. There's not too much really else that there's left to micro defend against that. So just fingers crossed that goes okay. Most of the Quarrelers are going to be out of commission, but I've killed off most of the Bestigor herd. And with the final volley, I should even be able to kill off most of these Ungors. So actually, things going fairly well all of a sudden, just because of that that huge volley that I got off in the mid game. And it's just whether or not I can kill off the single entities. The huge charge coming in from the Butchers of Kalkengard will be getting in some pretty nice damage onto my forces. They pull away to hit my Quarrelers instead, which means I do have a bit more time to hit up the chariots. Take a decent amount of damage, but do disengage. And it's going to come down to the micro of Alfredino now. Will he be able to use the Butchers of Kalkengard to finish off these Iron Breakers? They have effectively about 90 melee defense. So if the charge doesn't go well, those Iron Breakers are going to be doing a lot of damage. And we'll see, with a nice charge on the Beast Lord, I might be able to catch him out, but no, he does manage a pretty clean disengage. And yeah, I'll just have to try and regroup with my army at this point. I have a couple Dwarf Warriors over here too that that could run into some issues, as they are a bit exposed. They might just get finished off by the Butchers of Kalkengard. And for the rest of the army, you know, they are getting shot up by Ungor Raiders, but they are almost out of ammunition, so I think on that front I'm feeling okay. For the Butchers, I can pretty easily ward them off, having braced up with my infantry. And then once the Beastmen are out of infantry, he's going to have to commit to fights for quite a bit longer. So here we go. The charge comes on in. I'll give my troops their leadership buff, and we'll see if they're able to actually hold here. Looking like most of the troops are actually breaking off. My Lord is still fairly high on HP. And it depends on the Iron Breakers. They did actually take a decent amount of damage here. And I think Alfredino likely has this game. Although it was very close, in the end, I think if I had thrown my blasting charges a little bit better, I probably would have been able to come out on top. But instead, the rest of the army just getting cycle charged, and that's going to be it. GG! Victory moo indeed. And, oh man, even a Manticore summon, I think, coming down. Just enough Winds of Magic. And that's going to be more than enough to secure the game. So, the main thing you want are the blasting charges on top of these Bestigors. I waited for them to clump up. I'm not sure if it was the map and the hill that got the blasting charges not to throw, or if it was the guard mode. I think having guard mode off on these guys might have been the more likely answer. And also, with my Quarrelers, I should have been focusing the Butchers, as they are one of the more priority targets to take down. Shooting at the Ungor Raiders didn't really do much, and it would have been much better to kill off these guys. As for the Slayers, they did good, and the Longbeards fell apart due to the blasting charges not connecting. So GG, readied up. And here we go for the final game of today. It's going to be another troll rush up against the Bretonnians. Should be able to win against all of these Knights of the Realm very handily. And the biggest threat are these single entity squads for Bretonia. However, the trolls will just be marching straight towards these archers. And we'll just be sending in some fireballs into, I guess, the sides of these Knights Errant. Might be better to instead actually go for something else here. But actually a pretty committed charge from the Bretonnians. The trolls will be able to trade out fairly well, plus I have the dogs around. So I'm not sure how well this actually works for Bretonia. We'll have to see. I'm interested to see how it plays out for sure. A nice boat too onto all the knights. Looks like it should do pretty well. I do eat a bit of a hard charge here. But So far, it looks like the trolls have been able to survive for quite some time. I do blob up a tiny bit over here, though. And that could cause a few issues, as Enchantress, who will be mortis engineing most of my troops, and I'm worried that Archer Fire will actually be turning this situation out of my favor. We'll keep a close eye on that, and also taking a look at my trolls. Looks like I've killed off a good amount of the knights. But I've also had 2 of my trolls routed off. Definitely a few pluses and minuses there. And honestly, things are looking a little bit bad already. It seems like just having this much cavalry is causing a few issues here. But I'll continue onwards. We'll start surrounding these single entities here, but it may just be better to move into the back line right now, and I think I will. I'll grab my wolves and push them towards the towards these archers. Get my caster into the back too, and then see how well this engagement goes. Most of my trolls in the back are now routed off, and I think that overload from Alfredino is just really caused a lot of problems. Jeez, I would not have guessed that Knights Errant would be able to rout off the trolls so quickly, but I guess just the full surround is pretty brutal. And now with another charge on the back here, I'm going to be a tiny bit worried. Let's go ahead and pull away with the wolves. See if I can pick out a few more Knights Errant here. Hopefully rout off a couple of archers. And as for Wulfric, I wish I had a boat, but it is on cooldown in this situation. Just taking stock. Seems like, let's see here. I only have 2 units of healthy trolls left. The archers are still firing. And unless I get a massive boat here to end all worlds, I think that's gonna be it already. Although I do rout off the archers. Some of the trolls do rally. The knights are pretty beat up. So you never know, things could actually swing back in my favor. Of course the double paladin Fey Enchantress is going to be quite threatening. But with a couple of marauders left and wolves diving in on peasant archers, I'll still probably need a miracle to pull it off. Let's see. I have a burning head. That'll do really well against these archers. Wulfric is still doing decently in his melee fight here. Getting sort of picked off by paladins though. I'll need to throw down a Hunter of Champions on him possibly. Take him out. That does seem pretty unlikely, and I think that's gonna be it already. GG. Oh my gosh. Absolutely brutal. Absolutely brutal. And I think most of that came in from the lack of skirmishers here. If I had a couple skirmishers, I could have warded away the cavalry a lot easier. And I think that I would have had a much better chance after that. Instead, I went really wide, expecting to survive against so much cavalry. But just an overload on one of my flanks really punished that. So I think taking a bit more cavalry, and if I see such an overwhelming force, I think the best bet probably would be to pull into a closer, tightly knit blob, and then just use my skirmishers to hold while I continue pressing forwards. If I can eventually loop them into the back too, knights will have to pull back to defend the archers, and then that would give me a much better time. But enough analysis of that. I'll definitely want to change up the build. That's gonna be it.